the San Francisco law office was thick with the scent of polished oak and betrayal. I stood at the edge of the conference room, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, each step a deliberate rebellion against the silence I'd worn like a second skin for years. My name is Sophia Voss, and today I was about to walk into a war I'd been fighting since I was a child, one I didn't start but was determined to finish. My family sat across the long mahogany table, their faces a gallery of practiced disdain. My father, Richard, in his pressed navy suit, stared past me like I was a stranger. My mother, Elaine, clutched her pearls, her eyes flicking everywhere but mine, and Clara, my sister, lounged with her legs crossed, her designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown she'd already claimed. They thought they'd won before the game even began. They were wrong. The lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife through silk. "We're here to execute the final wishes of Henry Voss," he said, his tone as steady as the ticking of the antique clock in the corner. I sat last, as always, the afterthought in a family that had long since written me out of their story. My hands rested in my lap, steady, despite the pulse hammering in my throat. I'd learned to hide my shaking years ago, when I was 16, standing in the rain outside our Pacific Heights mansion, watching Christmas lights glow through windows that no longer welcomed me. That memory clung to me now, sharp and cold, as Caldwell opened the leather-bound folder. "To Clara Voss," he began, and my sister's lips curled into a smug smile. "Henry leaves the Napa Valley vineyard and his 1962 Fender Stratocaster." Clara's smile faltered, her manicured nails pausing mid-tap on the armrest. "A vineyard and a guitar? That was it?" I caught the flicker of disappointment in her eyes, but she masked it quickly, leaning back as if she'd expected nothing more. I knew better. Clara had always been the golden child, the one who got the private tutors, the European vacations, the trust fund I'd never touched. She'd expected the world. Caldwell continued, unfazed. "To Richard and Elaine Voss, Henry leaves his vintage car collection, a 1957 Chevy Bel Air and a 1963 Mustang, and a $15,000 0 cents charitable donation in your names to the San Francisco Arts Foundation." My mother let out a choked gasp, her pearls clicking as her hand flew to her chest. "15,000?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. My father's jaw tightened, his arms folding so tightly I thought his suit might split. "This is absurd," he muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. "A donation? Cars? That's pocket change." I sat still, my face a blank canvas, but inside, my heart was a drumbeat. I knew what was coming. I'd known since the night Grandpa Henry pulled me aside at his old Victorian in Marin, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "They'll try to break you, Sophia," he'd said, his eyes sharp despite the oxygen tube in his nose. "But you're stronger than they know." I hadn't believed him then. I'd spent too many years being the outcast, the one whose room was turned into a yoga studio while I was still at college, the one whose college fund vanished into family investments I never saw. But now, as Caldwell's eyes met mine, I felt the weight of his words settle into my bones. "And to Sophia Voss," Caldwell said, pausing just long enough for the room to still, "Henry leaves his entire financial estate, totaling $25,387,000 0 cents in liquid assets, including all stocks, bonds, and cash reserves." The silence was deafening, like the moment before a storm breaks. My father's chair scraped back. "What?" he barked, his voice a thunderclap. My mother's face drained of color, her pearls forgotten as she leaned forward. "That's impossible," she snapped. "She hasn't spoken to us in years. She walked away from this family." Clara's sunglasses slid down her nose, her smirk replaced by a scowl. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Grandpa felt sorry for her, that's all. She's been playing the victim her whole life. I didn't flinch. I didn't reach for the envelope Caldwell slid across the table, its wax seal stamped with Grandpa's old crest. A lighthouse, stubborn against the waves. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. A folded check, crisp and official, and a note in Grandpa's looping script. For the one who endured in silence, you were always seen. My father lunged across the table, snatching the check before I could touch it. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice calm, almost too calm. He didn't answer. He held it up, inspecting it like it was a forged dollar bill, his hands trembling with rage. Elaine grabbed the note, her eyes scanning the words before her lips twisted. "Endured in silence?" she spat. "You mean ungrateful? You abandoned us, Sophia. You don't get to waltz back in and steal everything." She tore the note in half, then again, the pieces fluttering to the table like ashes. Clara leaned back, her smirk returning. "Oh, come on, Soph. You've always been the sad little orphan act. Grandpa just fell for it." I didn't move, didn't blink. My father pulled a lighter from his coat pocket, the same one he used to light his cigars at the country club. "Richard," Caldwell warned, standing. "I'm not letting her buy her way back into this family," my father growled. The flame caught the check, and it curled fast, blackening into the crystal ashtray between us. Smoke rose in delicate spirals, carrying the illusion of my inheritance with it. "Now we're even," he said, his voice thick with triumph. Elaine crossed her arms, her smile cold. "This is what happens when you betray your blood?" I watched the ashes settle, the last of Grandpa's decoy disappearing into nothing, and then I smiled. Not the kind you flash for Instagram, but the kind that creeps up slow, like the first light after a long, brutal night. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd burned my future. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the check was a fake, a blank stand-in, just like the one Grandpa had shown me in his study a month before he died. "They'll want to destroy something," he'd said, his voice low, his eyes sharp. "Let them. It'll blind them to the real move." The real check, wired to a trust in my name, was untouchable, untraceable, and already mine. The folder he'd slipped me 2 months ago, marked with a single word, Trillium, was tucked inside my coat, safe against my chest. I stood, pressing the now empty envelope between my hands, and walked out. No words, no scene, just the sharp tap of my heels on the oak floor, louder now, echoing like a heartbeat. Outside, the San Francisco fog wrapped around me, cold and familiar, but I didn't shiver. I slid into my beat-up Honda, the one I'd bought with my own money after they cut me off, and placed the charred envelope on the passenger seat. Then I opened the folder. Inside, on top of a stack of documents, was Grandpa's handwriting. "Let them think they won." That's where it starts. I drove through the city, the Golden Gate Bridge looming in the distance, its red arches half swallowed by the mist. My phone buzzed as I pulled into the private parking lot of Bayview Trust Bank, but I ignored it. I wasn't ready to hear Clara's fake apologies or my mother's veiled threats, not yet. The bank's lobby was all glass and steel, a cathedral of wealth that felt worlds away from the cramped apartment I'd been renting since college. Mr. Larson, the trust officer, was waiting by the elevator, his suit as crisp as his nod. "Miss Voss," he said, gesturing toward the secured floor. "Everything's ready, per Henry's instructions." We didn't speak as the elevator hummed downward. The vault room was cold, the air heavy with the scent of metal and time. Larson slid a numbered drawer toward me, the soft scrape of steel on steel making my skin prickle. "Take your time," he said, stepping out. I sat on the lone bench, staring at the box. 2 months ago, Grandpa had handed me a brown envelope in a diner off Highway 1, his hand shaking but his voice firm. "Don't open it until after the will's read," he'd said. "The key is Trillium. You remember it?" I'd nodded, repeating the word every night since, like a mantra, to keep the world at bay. Now, as I opened the box, I whispered it again. Trillium. Inside were 3 things: a certified cashier's check for $25,387,000, 0 cents, a flash drive in a velvet pouch, and a file bound with red ribbon. The check was real, its weight heavier than paper should be, signed in Grandpa's unmistakable script. I traced the ink, the same looping letters I'd seen on birthday cards he'd sent when no one else remembered. The legal file held 2 older wills, one from 10 years ago, another from 4, both naming Clara and my parents as primary beneficiaries. Grandpa's notes filled the margins. Elaine pushed for this split, felt wrong, and later, "Richard said Sophia wouldn't know what to do with it. He's underestimating her." The final pages were different, clean and final. Everything was mine. The flash drive was last. I slipped it into my laptop, my hands steady despite the knot in my chest. Grandpa's face appeared, filmed in his old study, surrounded by leather-bound books and a dusty lamp I used to hide under as a kid. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he said, his voice soft but resolute. I wish I could see their faces when they realized they didn't win. He smiled, a sad, knowing curve of his lip. "I saw what they did to you, Sophia. The way they froze you out, took your college fund, turned your bedroom into a guest suite while you were still at Berkeley. I knew about the lies, calling you unstable, difficult, just because you wouldn't bend to their rules. I should have stopped it sooner. I thought time would fix them. I was wrong." My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. He leaned closer to the camera. "You were the only one who never asked for anything, but gave everything. You stayed silent, and that wasn't weakness, it was strength. This is yours now. Let them rage, the law's on your side." The screen faded to black, and I sat there, the vault's silence pressing against me like a living thing. I didn't move for a long time, just held the check, the file, the drive. They didn't erase the years of being invisible, the birthdays spent alone, the Christmas I stood outside our house, watching my family laugh over wine while I clutched a suitcase in the snow. But they were proof I wasn't the ghost they'd made me. I left the bank, the folder tucked inside my coat, and drove to my apartment in the Mission District. The city buzzed around me, oblivious to the war I was fighting. My phone buzzed again, Clara, probably, with her crocodile tears. I ignored it and locked the door behind me. The apartment was small, cluttered with secondhand furniture and dreams I'd stopped believing in. I placed the burned envelope on my kitchen table, a relic of their victory they didn't deserve. Then I opened a drawer, pulling out the scarf Grandpa gave me when I was 12. Its cedar scent still clinging to the wool. I wrapped the check, USB, and documents inside, locking them in a fireproof safe at the back of my closet. Then I sat at my desk, staring at a folder I hadn't touched in years. College acceptance letters I'd never answered, business plans I'd sketched when I still thought I could belong. A memory hit me, sharp and uninvited. Sophomore year at Berkeley, I'd come home early for Thanksgiving, hoping to surprise them. Instead, I found my bedroom stripped bare, my books boxed up, my bed replaced with Clara's Peloton and a meditation corner. "It's my wellness space now," Clara had said, her voice bright, like she was showing off a new purse. I didn't fight. I packed my bag and left, whispering to myself in the car. Just get through it, I always did. But now, holding Grandpa's folder, I whispered something new. I'm not that girl anymore. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 6:05 a.m., sharp and jarring against the quiet of my apartment. No caller ID, just unknown. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut said to answer. Sophia, Clara's voice purred, too warm, too soft. It's early, I know. Can we talk, just us? Coffee, like old times. I didn't trust her. The last time we had coffee, she'd blamed me for ruining Mom's charity gala because I didn't clap loud enough for her speech. But I said, fine, 10 a.m. Pike Place Cafe. She agreed too quickly, and I deleted her number from my phone again, just to be safe. I spent the morning pacing, my apartment feeling smaller with every step. I read Grandpa's financial notes from the vault, let my tea go cold, and checked the locks twice. By the time I reached the cafe, the Seattle sky was a heavy gray, the kind that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. Clara was already there, at our old finals week table by the window, her baby pink sweater too perfect for the dreary day. She stood as if to hug me, then sat back down, her smile faltering. It's been too long, she said, stirring her untouched latte. Remember those late nights here? You with your color-coded notes, me sneaking your tea when I was broke? I nodded, sipping my chamomile, letting her fill the silence. She shifted gears, her voice softening. Mom's a wreck since the will reading. Dad's not talking. They think you ghosted us, Soph. It's cruel. I raised an eyebrow, saying nothing. Her smile flickered. I get it. You've always felt like the outsider, but cutting us off? That's cold. Even Grandpa said you were too distant sometimes. I met her eyes. Did he say that to you, Clara? Or did someone else? Her jaw tightened, just for a second. Then she leaned forward, her voice cracking. That check Dad burned? Was it real? Because if it was, that's a lot of money to let go. There it was, the real reason she'd called. I set my mug down. It was just paper. She blinked, confused. What? It's gone now, I said, standing and slipping on my coat. Let's not lose more. Her voice rose, sharp. Wait! Mom's talking about contesting the will. I turned, my face still. She can try. I walked out, the wind biting through my coat, but I didn't rush. Each step felt like breaking a chain I'd worn too long. Back at my apartment, I kicked off my shoes, the faint smell of cinnamon latte clinging to my sweater. I was reaching for the kettle when I noticed it, a plain white envelope taped to my front door, just below the peephole. No name, no address, just tight, angled handwriting that stirred a memory I couldn't place. I peeled it off, my pulse quickening, and sat at the kitchen table. Inside was a single sheet. What they burned wasn't real. Don't speak. Move wisely. Check box 12 at Pacific Vaults. My breath caught. Whoever wrote this knew what had happened. They knew about the decoy. I folded the note and slid it under a cookbook, my hands steady but my mind racing. I opened the drawer by the stove, and there it was, Grandpa's brass key, given to me on my 18th birthday with a cryptic promise. You'll need this when you're ready to claim yourself. I'd thought it was just sentimental nonsense, but now it felt heavy, alive. I didn't sleep that night, the envelope and key on my coffee table, the note's words echoing like a warning whispered in the dark. Morning came, gray and heavy. I called Pacific Vaults, my voice calm despite the storm in my chest. I'm Sophia Voss, I said. I need to access box 12, tied to my grandfather's estate. The receptionist's voice was clipped. Do you have the key? Yes, I said. And the box number? It's under your name, Ms. Voss. Bring 2 IDs and the key. 2 p.m. work? I agreed, spending the next hours in silence, my mind elsewhere as I dressed and pulled my hair into a tight bun. The vault building was tucked into a quiet Seattle street, its discreet sign blending with the bare trees. Inside it smelled of cedar and money. The woman at the desk checked my ID and key, then led me to a wood-paneled room with a single table and a wall of safe deposit boxes. She unlocked box 12 and left me alone. I sat, my hands steady as I opened it. Inside was a certified $25.00 M check, its seal pressed deep, and an envelope with Grandpa's handwriting. Read only if they burn the first one. I opened it, my chest tight. If you're reading this, they showed you who they are. The money's not the gift. It's knowing who to trust when the fire starts. Keep your own counsel. Don't let them make you small again. I repacked the box, my breath shallow but my resolve iron. As I stepped outside, the sun was low, casting long shadows. Across the street, a woman stood, watching. Middle-aged, auburn hair in a tight knot, beige jacket and a scarf, pale blue with ivory trim, my mother's initials stitched in the corner. It was the scarf she'd claimed was lost years ago. Her eyes locked on mine, unblinking, tracking my every move. My heart pounded, but I didn't look away. I adjusted my bag, checked my phone, and walked toward a corner cafe, my hands shaking. Inside, I cut through the dining area, nodding at the barista, and slipped out the back door into an alley. I moved fast, looping behind a bakery, my pulse a drumbeat as I doubled back to my car. When I glanced back, she was gone, but the scarf lingered in my mind like a warning. I didn't go home. My gut screamed to keep moving. I drove to a library in Capitol Hill, the same one Grandpa used to take me to, its chipped stairs and musty smell unchanged. I logged into a public computer, my fingers cold as I checked the estate email. A flagged message waited, sent 3 weeks ago from an unknown address. They're not after the money. They're after the signature that controls Voss Enterprises. Attached was a notarized transfer form, dated before Grandpa's death, giving me full voting rights. My name, Sophia Marie Voss, was in his script. This wasn't just about wealth. It was about power. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered, my voice steady. Hello? A pause. Then a familiar voice, calm but urgent. You opened box 12, didn't you? It was Margaret, Grandpa's assistant, gone silent since the funeral. Who is this? I asked, though I knew. It's Margaret, and if you've opened that box, you need to listen carefully. Margaret's voice crackled through the phone, low and urgent, pulling me deeper into the storm I'd only begun to navigate. They're not just cutting you out, Sophia, she said, each word deliberate, like she was measuring the weight of a secret she'd carried too long. They're erasing you. Check the deed to the Sausalito property, the original, not the copies. Then go to the Seattle Historical Archive. Use your birth name. I left something there for you months ago, just in case. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me clutching the phone in the dim light of the Capitol Hill Library, the hum of public computers my only company. My pulse raced, not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't just about the $25 million, 0 cents. It was about my existence, my name, my right to be. I didn't move for a moment, my mind replaying Margaret's words. Erasing me? The idea was absurd, but the woman with my mother's scarf, the forged check, the locked bank accounts, they weren't coincidences. They were moves in a game I hadn't realized I was playing. I closed the browser, wiped the history, and slipped out of the library, the Seattle drizzle clinging to my coat like a warning. The streets were alive with late afternoon bustle, tech workers grabbing coffee, tourists snapping photos of the Space Needle, but I felt like a ghost, moving through a world that didn't see me. My Honda was parked 2 blocks away, and as I approached, I noticed something off. The driver's side window was cracked open just an inch, but I never left it that way. My stomach twisted. I scanned the street, half expecting the scarf to reappear, but saw only strangers. I slid inside, locked the doors, and checked the glove box. Nothing was missing, but a faint scent lingered. Cigars, sharp and familiar, like the ones my father smoked at his galas. I drove, my hands tight on the wheel, weaving through traffic toward a Tacoma motel I'd found online. No way was I going back to my apartment, not with that note, that scarf, that cracked window. The motel was a rundown relic off I-5, its neon sign flickering like it was on its last breath. I paid cash, gave a fake name, Emma Carter, got a keycard that barely worked. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and regret, the yellow walls peeling, the AC rattling like a death rattle. I didn't care. I dropped my bag, pulled out the USB from box 12 and plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered, and Grandpa's face appeared again, this time in his sunroom, a red cardinal tapping at the window behind him. His eyes were tired but fierce, locked on the camera like he was speaking directly to me. "If you're seeing this, Sophia, they've gone too far," he said, his voice steady despite the oxygen tube. "You were always the one who stood apart, not because you wanted to, but because they wouldn't let you in, the company, the trust, the legacy. It was always meant for you. But I knew they'd try to take it, and when they couldn't, they'd come for you." He paused, his breath shallow. I moved the final piece somewhere they'd never look, with someone they'd never suspect. "There's a man named Elias Grant off Route 17, near the old warehouse. Find him. He has what you need." The video cut to black and I sat there, my heart pounding. Elias Grant. Route 17. A warehouse. It was a map, a lifeline, but it felt like a dare. I didn't sleep. The motel bed was stiff, the highway noise relentless, but it was Grandpa's words that kept me awake. They'd buried me alive, but he'd planted something in the dirt. I left at dawn, the coastal air heavy with salt and mist. Route 17 was a 40-minute drive from Tacoma, past strip malls and rusted gas stations, into pine woods, where the roads cracked and narrowed. My GPS pinged as I neared a chain-link fence, behind which sat a cluster of metal storage units, relics of a forgotten industrial park. A faded sign read, "Voss & Co. Emergency Holdings." I parked on a patch of gravel, the silence broken only by cicadas and a distant crow. Unit 19B was dead ahead, its padlock gleaming despite the rust around it. I twisted Grandpa's brass key, the squeal of metal making me wince. Dust fell as the door creaked upward, revealing a dimly lit space packed with boxes, shelves, and a rolled-up rug. Front and center was a fireproof briefcase, black and heavy with a note taped to it in Grandpa's handwriting. "If they ever burn you, open this." I pulled it close, sitting on a crate, my fingers fumbling with the latches. Inside was a tape recorder labeled "For Her Ears Only," a manila folder, and a weight that felt like truth. I pressed play, and Grandpa's voice filled the space, fragile but fierce. "They told me they'd put me in a home if I tried to change it," he said. "Your mother brought papers, claimed they were court-reviewed. But I knew what they were doing. I left you something they couldn't touch. You're the legacy they're afraid of." The folder held my original birth certificate. Sophia Marie Voss. No hyphens, no stepfather's name. There were letters, a dozen, addressed to me but never mailed. One dated the week before Grandpa's final will. Another was written days after a forged death certificate I didn't yet know existed. Below them was a will draft, notarized, naming me sole executor of the Voss family trust, and then, tucked under a plastic binder, a land deed in my name for the Sausalito estate. The foundation of my family's power. I exhaled, my hands shaking. This wasn't theft. It was war. I snapped photos of every page, uploading them to a cloud drive with triple encryption. As the last file loaded, I heard a crunch outside. Gravel under tires. My heart stopped. I peered through a crack in the door. A black SUV idled at the fence, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. 2 men stepped out, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark jackets, one holding a crowbar. My breath caught. They weren't here for a chat. I shoved the briefcase under a tarp, grabbed my phone, and slipped out the back exit, a rusted door half hidden by crates. The lock gave with a push, and I ran, ducking into a delivery truck parked behind the bakery next door. The men's voices carried, low, clipped, searching. I held my breath, my body pressed against the truck's cold metal until their footsteps faded and the SUV's engine roared away. I didn't go back for the briefcase. Not yet. I drove to a diner off the highway, my hands still trembling as I ordered coffee I wouldn't drink. The burner phone I'd bought at a gas station buzzed with a voicemail. It was Clara, her voice cracking like she'd been crying. "Sophia, if you're alive, I didn't know they were going to take it that far. I didn't know about the death form. I swear it wasn't me. I just signed where they told me. Please believe me." I laughed, a bitter sound that startled the waitress. "Thanks for the confession, sis," I muttered, saving the message. It was evidence, and I'd need every scrap. I called a probate lawyer in Seattle, Diane Holt, her number scribbled on my motel receipt. "I need to speak to someone about a will contest and identity fraud," I said, my voice steady. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. "Yes, and I'd prefer to meet discreetly." She booked me for 3:30 p.m., directing me to a side entrance on 6th Street. I spent the hours before the meeting uploading more scans, my fingers moving on instinct. The diner's Wi-Fi was slow, but it worked. As I left, a man at the counter glanced up, his eyes lingering too long. I didn't recognize him, but his leather jacket and the way he tilted his head screamed trouble. I slipped out, checking my rearview mirror as I drove downtown. The Fulton and Wesley building was understated, its frosted glass doors hiding the kind of power that didn't need to shout. I checked my reflection in the elevator, calm, composed, a woman who'd been erased but refused to vanish. At the receptionist's desk, I said, "Sophia Voss, 3:30 with Diane Holt." The woman's fingers paused, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. "Of course," she said, gesturing to a seat. The waiting room was all hushed tones and leather chairs, but I felt the weight of eyes on me. A man in a gray suit glanced up from his phone, then looked away too quickly. Paranoia, maybe, but I didn't trust it. Diane Holt was a force, silver hair swept back, suit sharp enough to cut glass, eyes that missed nothing. "Sophia Voss," she said, not a question but a statement. "I was wondering when you'd stop being their ghost." Her voice was steady, grounded, like she'd fought battles and buried the losers. I followed her to a private room, its thick walls promising secrecy. "What have you got?" she asked, motioning to the table. I spread out the photos, the will, the deed, plugged in the USB. She didn't flinch, just nodded, her pen tapping twice as she read Grandpa's note. "If they ever burn you, open this." Her eyes softened, just for a moment, before she pulled out a sealed envelope from her drawer. "Your grandfather wasn't blind," she said, sliding it to me. 2 months before his death, he came to us, had us notarize a witness affidavit and a personal statement. He knew they'd retaliate. I opened the envelope, my throat tight. Grandpa's words were typewritten, precise. "I, Henry Voss, affirm that I have revised my estate to name my granddaughter, Sophia Voss, as sole heir to all financial holdings not tied to land. Act freely. Aware of family disputes." The notary's name was Lillian Hayes, a woman I remembered from childhood potlucks, her laugh as warm as her apple pie. "She witnessed it?" I asked, my voice rough. Diana nodded. "Retired now, lives in Oregon. She gave a notarized affidavit, witnessed by 2 attorneys. I exhaled, the weight of vindication settling over me like armor. "So, what now?" I asked. Diane leaned back, her eyes sharp. We file a probate challenge, request an expedited hearing based on concealed evidence and fraud, let the court decide who gets ashes and who gets the empire. She paused, her voice lowering. But don't contact them. Let them keep posting their victory laps online. Every smug caption is a gift. I showed her a screenshot. My mother and Clara arm in arm in front of the Sausalito estate, captioned, "First in line, always have been." Diane's lips twitched. "Schedule a photographer," she said. "Post your truth just before the notice hits. Let the shame sink in." As I left her office, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Clara, her voice frayed. "Sophia, I didn't know about the death form. I didn't sign anything. It was all Dad. Please don't shut me out." I saved it, my smile cold but peaceful. "Keep talking, sis," I whispered, stepping into the Seattle dusk. The next morning, I headed to the Seattle Historical Archive, Margaret's words echoing, "Use your birth name." The archive was a gray stone building, its steps worn by time. Inside, it smelled of old paper and dust, the kind of place that held secrets no one bothered to look for. I approached the counter, my ID ready. "I'm Sophia Marie Voss," I said. "I need to check records under my name." The young woman clicked her pen, her glasses slipping down her nose. "Sure, let's see," she typed, then frowned. "That's odd." She turned the screen toward me, and my blood ran cold. Status: deceased. Date of death: 2 weeks ago. Cause: pedestrian collision confirmed via dental records. I gripped the counter, my knees weak. "There's a mistake," I managed, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. She pushed her glasses up. "This is a certified copy with a state registrar's seal. That means someone with authority pushed it through." I swallowed hard. "How does this happen?" She hesitated. "Usually a hospital, an estate executor, or family." The word landed like a slap. Family. They hadn't just disinherited me. They'd killed me on paper. I left the archive, the air outside too sharp, every breath a blade. I caught a cab to the Seattle City Records office, my bag heavy with IDs, my social security card, anything to prove I was alive. The clerk was polite, her customer service smile practiced, but her frown deepened as she typed. "Your social security number's flagged as inactive," she said. "That only happens when someone dies." I nodded, finishing her sentence. "Exactly." I tried my bank app. Account not found. My credit card suspended. Contact issuer. I leaned against the counter, dizzy, the world too loud, too normal. People laughed outside, kids chased a bus, and I was a ghost with a heartbeat. A memory hit. Grandpa after his 3rd stroke, his voice slow but sharp. "If they can't control you, Sophia, they'll wipe you off the map. That's what power does when it's scared." He'd been right. I left the records office, my steps fast, my mind faster. I couldn't go home, not to my apartment, not anywhere they could find me. I ducked into a cafe, used the public Wi-Fi to book another motel under a fake name, Lila Monroe, and paid cash at the desk. The room was worse than the last, the walls a sickly green, the bed sagging, but it was safe. For now. I pulled out the USB, my hands steady despite the chaos. The folder held one file. "Watch me first." I clicked, and Grandpa's face filled the screen again, his eyes locked on mine. "They'll try to bury you," he said, "but I planted something in the dirt. Find alias Grant. He's got the final piece." I closed the laptop, my resolve hardening. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. The drive to Route 17 was tense, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, half expecting the black SUV to reappear. The warehouse district was desolate, the air thick with pine and decay. I found Elias Grant's address, a run-down trailer behind a shuttered lumber yard. I knocked, my heart in my throat. The door creaked open, revealing a man in his 60s, grizzled, with eyes that had seen too much. "You, Sophia?" he asked, his voice rough. I nodded. He handed me a sealed envelope. No questions, no small talk. "Henry said you'd come," he said, then shut the door. Inside the envelope was a key card and a note. Voss Enterprises server room, basement level, Pier 70. Access the drive labeled Legacy. My breath caught. The server room? That was the heart of the company, where every contract, every deal, every secret lived. I drove to San Francisco, the city lights blurring as I crossed the Bay Bridge. Pier 70 was a maze of old warehouses, the air heavy with salt and rot. I swiped the keycard at a side door, the lock clicking green. The basement was a labyrinth of pipes and flickering lights, the server room hidden behind a steel door. I found the drive, plugged it into a terminal, and watched as files loaded. Contracts, emails, proof that my parents had siphoned company funds, forged signatures, and planned to sell Voss Enterprises to a rival. A noise echoed. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. I yanked the drive, my heart racing, and hid behind a server rack. 2 men entered, their voices low. "She's here," one said. "Find her." I held my breath, my body pressed against the cold metal until they moved to the next room. I slipped out, running through the basement, my footsteps echoing. A hand grabbed my arm at the exit, spinning me around. It was the man from the diner, his leather jacket reeking of cigars. "You're out of moves, Voss," he growled. I twisted free, my elbow connecting with his jaw, and ran, diving into my car as he shouted after me. I drove to Diane's office, the drive clutched in my hand. She didn't blink as I spilled the story, the death certificate, the server files, the men at the warehouse. "This is enough to bury them," she said, her voice calm but fierce. "But you need to stay alive long enough to use it." She filed the probate challenge that night, scheduling a hearing for the next week. I spent the days in hiding, moving between motels, my burner phone my only link to the world. Clara's voicemails kept coming, each one more desperate. "I didn't know, Sophia, I swear. Don't do this." I saved every one, my anger giving way to resolve. The hearing was in a Seattle courthouse, its marble atrium cold and imposing. Diane walked beside me, her presence a shield. My parents sat with their lawyer, a young hotshot who smirked like he'd already won. My father's blazer was wrinkled, my mother's pearls askew. They didn't look at me, but their tension was palpable. Judge Ramsey entered, his face stern, his voice measured. Diane presented the will, the affidavit, the server files, and Grandpa's video. His voice filled the courtroom, clear and unyielding. "They pressured me, lied about Sophia. I changed the will because she's the only one I trust." My father scoffed, but the judge silenced him. Diane added Clara's texts to Grandpa, threatening complications if he didn't comply. The judge's eyes narrowed. "I've seen greed," he said, "but rarely this brazen. He ruled me sole heir, froze my family's assets, and ordered an investigation into fraud and coercion." Outside, a reporter shoved a mic in my face. "Any words for your family, Ms. Voss?" I paused, the city moving around me. "They burned the only love that ever saw me," I said, walking away, not in anger, but in peace. Back at my motel, I stared at the drive, the deed, the truth. I'd won, but the cost was etched in every scar, every Christmas alone, every lie they'd told. Yet Grandpa's words lingered. "You're the legacy they're afraid of." I smiled, not for them, but for me. The war wasn't over, but I was no longer fighting to prove I existed. I was fighting to build what came next.